the Watcher in the Shadows. In the ancient kingdom of Voldoria, where mist clung to mountain peaks and forests whispered secrets older than memory, there existed a castle that few mortals ever saw. It stood at the edge of the world, carved from obsidian stone and silver moonlight, home to the one they called the Vampire King. His name was Aldrich, and he had walked this earth for over 800 years. Most believed him to be a creature of darkness, a monster who fed on fear and shadow. But those who truly knew the old stories understood something different. Aldrich was a guardian, a keeper of ancient promises, a soul who had chosen duty over destruction centuries ago when others of his kind had fallen to madness and cruelty. On this particular evening, Aldrich stood at the highest tower of his castle, his crimson eyes fixed on a distant light that flickered in a manor house 3 valleys away. That light belonged to a window in the bedroom of Queen Seraphina of the Gothic court, and for the past 7 months he had watched that light with growing concern. Something was wrong. He could feel it in the way the wind carried whispers of sorrow. He could sense it in the trembling of the earth beneath his feet, a subtle vibration that spoke of suffering. And he could see it in the way that light flickered more frantically tonight than it ever had before. Aldrich closed his eyes and remembered a promise made long ago. 150 years passed, when he had been wounded and near death after a betrayal by those he once trusted. A young mortal woman had found him in the forest. She had been gathering herbs for her village, this simple girl with kind eyes and steady hands. She could have screamed. She could have run. She could have summoned hunters to finish what others had started. Instead, she had knelt beside him and pressed cool cloths to his wounds. Even creatures of the night deserve mercy, as she had whispered. Even kings deserve kindness. Her name had been Helena, and she had saved his life without asking for anything in return. When Aldrich had finally healed, he had made her a promise that bound him across generations. Your bloodline will never know harm while I still walk this earth. This I swear to you, Helena. This debt I will carry until the stars themselves grow cold. Helena had smiled and patted his hand as if he were a lost child rather than an ancient immortal. Just be good, as she had told him. That is all I ask. Just be good. Helena had lived a full life. She had married, raised children, and passed peacefully in her sleep surrounded by those who loved her. Her daughter had done the same, and her daughter after that. The bloodline had grown and changed, moving through the world like a river flowing toward an unknown sea. And now, 5 generations later, the last of Helena's line sat in that distant manor, pregnant and afraid, married to a man who had proven himself unworthy of her gentle heart. Seraphina. Aldrich had watched her from afar since her birth. He had witnessed her first steps, her first words, the way she grew into a young woman of remarkable grace and quiet strength. She had inherited Helena's kind eyes and steady hands. She carried the same light within her soul, that rare warmth that made even an ancient vampire believe that goodness still existed in this world. When she had married Lord Marquis of the Southern Territories, Aldrich had hoped for her happiness. Marcus had seemed charming during the courtship, attentive and devoted. But darkness often hides behind pleasant masks, and within months of the wedding, Aldrich had begun to sense the change. The cruelty, the control, the slow erosion of Seraphina's spirit. And now she carried a child, and the danger had grown beyond what Aldrich could ignore. Tonight, the feeling was different. Tonight, something fundamental had shifted in the air, and every instinct Aldrich possessed screamed that he could wait no longer. He stepped off the tower ledge and dissolved into shadow, crossing the 3 valleys in the space of a single breath. Part 2. The Breaking Point. Inside the manor house, Queen Seraphina stood in the center of her chambers with her hands folded protectively over her swollen belly. She was 8 months pregnant now, and the weight of the child made her movements slow and careful. Her dark hair fell in waves around her pale face, and her gown of deep purple velvet seemed to swallow the candlelight rather than reflect it. She had been beautiful once, in the way that gentle souls often are. But months of walking on eggshells, of measuring every word and gesture, of trying to become invisible while living with a man who noticed every perceived slight, had dimmed that beauty. Now she looked tired. She looked hollow. She looked like a woman who had forgotten what it meant to feel safe. Lord Marcus paced before her, his boots striking the stone floor with angry rhythm. His face was flushed with wine and wounded pride, and his voice had risen to a volume that made the servants in the hallway freeze in terror. "You dare to question my decisions?" he demanded. "You dare to suggest that I have mismanaged our accounts?" Seraphina's voice came soft and steady, though her heart hammered against her ribs. "I only meant that perhaps we might delay the purchase of new horses until after the child arrives. The midwife's fees, the supplies we will need. The child, always the child." Marcus threw his goblet against the wall, and red wine splashed across the stones like blood. "That is all you speak of now. As if that creature growing inside you matters more than everything I have built." Seraphina flinched but did not retreat. She had learned that retreating only encouraged pursuit. She had learned that showing fear only fed the beast that lived inside her husband's chest. "The child matters to both of us," she said quietly. "That is all I meant." But Marcus was beyond reason now. The wine had loosened whatever thin restraint he usually maintained, and his eyes had taken on that glassy, dangerous quality that Seraphina had come to dread. "You think you are so clever," he hissed, stepping closer. "You think you can manage me, manipulate me, make me look the fool before our staff and our people. I have seen the way they look at you with pity. I have heard the whispers." "There are no whispers, Marcus. There is no manipulation. I only want peace for our family." "Lies." He raised his hand. Time seemed to slow. Seraphina saw the movement begin, saw the coiled tension in his shoulder, saw the rage that twisted his features into something barely human. She turned her body to shield her belly, accepting that the blow would fall somewhere, knowing that her only duty now was to protect the innocent life within her. She closed her eyes. The blow never came. Instead, the temperature in the room plummeted so suddenly that frost crystallized on the windows. The candles flickered and died, plunging the chamber into darkness broken only by the pale moonlight streaming through the glass. And in that silver glow, a figure materialized from shadow itself. Aldrich stood between Seraphina and her husband, one pale hand wrapped around Marcus's raised wrist. His grip was not tight enough to bruise, but Marcus could not move. He could not pull away. He could not do anything but stare into those ancient crimson eyes that held no rage, no threat, no fury. Only calm, absolute certainty. "She is mine," Aldrich said, and his voice filled the room like the tolling of a great bell. "Step away." Marcus's face went white. He had heard stories of the Vampire King, of course. Everyone in the realm had heard stories. But stories were one thing, and reality was quite another. The power that radiated from this creature was older than the mountains themselves, deeper than the ocean trenches, vast beyond any mortal comprehension. Aldrich released his wrist, and Marcus stumbled backward. "I claim the protection of House Valdoria over this woman and her child," Aldrich continued. "This claim is ancient and binding, sealed by blood oath to her ancestor 5 generations past. You have no authority here, Lord Marcus. You have no power that I recognize." Marcus's mouth opened and closed, but no words emerged. Aldrich turned his back on the mortal man, a gesture of such profound dismissal that it said more than any threat could have conveyed. He faced Seraphina, and his expression softened into something almost tender. "My lady," he said gently, "will you come with me?" Seraphina looked into those crimson eyes and saw no hunger there. No darkness. No danger. She saw only a quiet sadness, an ancient weariness, and beneath it all, a kindness that reminded her of something she had almost forgotten. "Yes," she whispered. "Yes, I will come." Aldrich extended his hand, and she took it. His skin was cool but not cold, smooth but not inhuman. He wrapped his cloak around her shoulders with the care of someone handling something infinitely precious. Then, without another glance at the man who had nearly broken her, they dissolved into shadow and were gone. The sanctuary. The castle of Valdoria was nothing like the stories suggested. Seraphina had expected darkness and decay, cobwebs and ancient dust, the trappings of death and eternal night. Instead, she found herself standing in a great hall filled with soft candlelight and the scent of winter roses. The walls were hung with tapestries depicting not battles and blood, but gardens and starlight and peaceful creatures grazing in moonlit meadows. "This was my mother's design," Aldrich said quietly, following her gaze. "She believed that beautiful things could heal even the deepest wounds. I have maintained her vision all these centuries." Seraphina's hand pressed against her belly as the child within her stirred. "Your mother was wise. She was mortal, actually. Like you." Aldrich gestured toward a doorway where warm light spilled across the threshold. "I have prepared chambers for you. They are warm and secure, and a midwife from the village will attend you tomorrow. She is human, kind, and has delivered many children safely into this world." You knew I would come? Aldrich's expression flickered with something that might have been sorrow. I knew that eventually I would need to intervene. I had hoped your husband would prove himself worthy of you. I watched and waited, praying that I was wrong about what I sensed. But hope is not a strategy, and patience has limits even for one as old as I. Seraphina felt tears prick at her eyes. You have been watching over me since the day you were born. It was a promise I made to your great-great-grandmother. She saved my life when she had every reason to let me die. I owe her bloodline a debt that can never be fully repaid. Helena, as Seraphina whispered. My grandmother used to tell me stories about her. She said Helena was the bravest woman who ever lived because she was kind even when kindness was dangerous. Aldrich smiled, and the expression transformed his features from something fearsome into something almost gentle. That was Helena exactly. And I see her spirit in you, Seraphina. The same courage. The same light. He led her to her chambers, where a fire crackled in a great stone hearth and a bed weighted with soft blankets and piled pillows. The windows overlooked a garden that somehow bloomed even in the heart of winter, flowers of midnight blue and silver-white nodding gently in a breeze that carried no chill. Rest now, Aldrich said. You are safe here. No one will harm you. No one will touch you. No one will raise their voice or their hand against you ever again. Seraphina sat on the edge of the bed, overwhelmed by the sudden shift from terror to sanctuary. Why are you doing this? You could have simply warned Marcus. You could have sent a letter, made a proclamation. You did not have to bring me here. Aldrich paused in the doorway, his back still turned. Because warnings fade and letters can be burned. Because men like Marcus believe themselves above consequence until they learn otherwise. And because his voice grew quieter. Because I failed someone once. Long ago. I had the power to protect her, and I hesitated. I told myself that her troubles were not my concern, that I should not interfere in mortal affairs. She died alone and afraid, and I have carried that weight for 400 years. He turned to face her, and Seraphina saw the ancient grief that lived beneath his composure. I will not fail again, he said simply. Sleep well, my lady. Tomorrow, we will speak of the future. The quiet days. The weeks that followed were the most peaceful of Seraphina's life. She woke each morning to sunlight streaming through windows that somehow filtered the light to comfort rather than harm the castle's master. She took her meals in a small dining room where Aldrich sometimes joined her, though he never ate. Instead, he would sit across from her and listen as she spoke of her childhood, her dreams, the books she had loved and the places she hoped to someday see. He was an excellent listener. He asked questions that showed he truly heard her words rather than simply waiting for his turn to speak. And when she fell silent, lost in thought or memory, he did not rush to fill the quiet. He let it breathe. The midwife, a plump woman named Greta with silver hair and knowing hands, visited every few days to check on Seraphina's progress. She seemed entirely unfazed by the nature of her employer. "The king has been good to our village for as long as anyone can remember," she told Serafina one afternoon while examining her belly. "He protects us from bandits and wild beasts. He sends healers when sickness spreads. He asks nothing in return but that we live good lives and treat each other with kindness." That is not what the stories say about him. Grettir chuckled. "Stories are told by those who fear what they do not understand. I have known the vampire king for 40 years, child. He attended my mother's funeral and wept. He held my firstborn son when he was 3 days old and blessed him with long life. Whatever darkness lives in his blood, he has chosen to overcome it. That is what matters." Serafina thought about this often as her pregnancy progressed. She had been taught to fear creatures like Aldrich, to believe that their nature was fundamentally corrupt. But everything she witnessed told a different story. She saw him tend his mother's rose garden with his own hands, carefully pruning each bush despite the thorns that drew blood from his fingers. She saw him receive petitioners from the nearby villages, listening to their concerns with patience and offering solutions that cost him resources and time. She saw him read to the servants' children on winter evenings, his deep voice carrying through the halls as he brought ancient tales to life. And she saw the way he looked at her sometimes when he thought she was not watching. Not with hunger or desire, but with something softer. Something that looked almost like hope. "You could have become what the stories claim," she said to him one evening as they sat before the fire. "Why didn't you?" Aldrich was silent for a long moment. "Because someone once showed me mercy when I deserved none. Because kindness reached me when hatred could not. We become what we choose to practice, Serafina. I have chosen to practice gentleness for 800 years. It does not always come naturally. The darkness still whispers sometimes. But choice is more powerful than nature. That is what Helena taught me." He turned to look at her, and the firelight caught the crimson in his eyes. "That is what you are teaching me still. Your grandmother's legacy lives on in you. Every time you choose grace over bitterness, every time you protect that child within you despite everything you have suffered, you remind me why I made the promises I made." Serafina reached out and took his hand. His fingers curled around hers, cool and steady, and she felt no fear at all. The arrival. The child came on a night when snow fell soft and silent across the mountain kingdom. Serafina woke to the first pains as moonlight painted silver patterns across her floor. By the time the sky began to lighten, she was gripping the bedposts and breathing through contractions that rolled through her body like waves. Grettir arrived within the hour, calm and competent, her hands already moving to prepare everything they would need. The castle servants bustled about with hot water and clean linens, and somewhere in the distance, Serafina could hear Aldrich pacing. "He has not stopped moving since I sent word," Grettir observed with amusement. 800 years old and nervous as a new father. "He is not the father," Serafina managed between breaths. "No. But he is something. Perhaps something more important." The labor lasted through the day and into the evening. It was difficult, as first births often are, and there were moments when fear gripped Seraphina's heart. But Greta remained steady, and every time Seraphina felt herself weakening, she thought of Aldrich waiting beyond the door. She thought of Helena, who had been brave enough to show kindness to a monster. She thought of the child who deserved to enter a world where people protected each other. And she pushed. The baby emerged just as the moon rose full and brilliant above the mountains. A girl, small and perfect, with dark hair and a cry that filled the chamber with the unmistakable sound of new life. "She is healthy," Greta announced, placing the wrapped bundle into Seraphina's arms. Strong lungs, strong heart, everything exactly as it should be. Seraphina looked down at her daughter's face and felt something crack open inside her chest. All the fear, all the pain, all the months of walking through shadow, it fell away like old skin, and what remained was pure, overwhelming love. "May I enter?" Aldrich's voice came from beyond the door, uncertain in a way she had never heard from him. "Yes," Seraphina called. "Please." He stepped into the room and stopped short at the sight of mother and child. For a moment, his ancient composure crumbled entirely. His eyes glistened with what might have been tears, and his hands trembled at his sides. "She is beautiful," he whispered. "She is," he swallowed hard. "She is Helena. She has her eyes." Seraphina held the baby up slightly. "Would you like to hold her?" Aldrich approached the bed slowly, as if afraid his presence might shatter something fragile. But when Seraphina placed the child in his arms, he held her with a gentleness that stole Seraphina's breath. "Hello, little one," he murmured. "I'm going to tell you a story. It is a story about your great-great-great-grandmother, who was the bravest woman I ever knew. She taught me that kindness is stronger than cruelty. She taught me that mercy is the highest form of power. And she made me promise to protect her family for as long as I live." He looked up at Seraphina, and the tears were falling freely now, tracking silver lines down his pale cheeks. "I will keep that promise. I will guard this child and her children and their children after them. I will watch over your line until the end of time itself. This I swear to you, Seraphina of the Gothic court. This I swear on everything I am and everything I hope to become." Seraphina reached out and touched his face, wiping away the tears with tender fingers. "Her name is Helena," as she said softly. "Helena Rose. And I cannot think of anyone I would rather have watch over her." The new beginning. Months passed. Seraphina chose to remain in the castle of Valdoria, not because she had nowhere else to go, but because she had found something she never expected to find. She had found home. She took over management of the household while Aldrich handled affairs of state. Together, they oversaw the protection of the mountain villages, the maintenance of ancient treaties, the careful balance between the mortal world and the creatures who walked its shadows. They were not husband and wife, not king and queen in any traditional sense. They were something harder to name. Partners, perhaps. Family. Little Helena grew strong and curious, crawling through the castle halls and reaching for everything she could grasp. She showed no fear of Aldrich, only delight whenever he entered a room. She would raise her small arms toward him and babble until he lifted her up, and then she would grab handfuls of his dark hair and laugh with pure infant joy. She has conquered him completely, Greta observed during one of her visits. The most powerful creature in 7 kingdoms, defeated by a child who cannot yet walk. Seraphina smiled as she watched Aldrich bounce Helena on his knee. Is that not how it should be? The powerful, softened by innocence. The strong, guided by those who need protection. Perhaps that is the oldest magic of all. When spring arrived and the rose garden burst into impossible color, Seraphina walked among the flowers with her daughter in her arms. Aldrich walked beside her, one hand hovering near them both, always watchful, always ready to shelter them from any harm. What happens now? Seraphina asked. What becomes of us as years pass and I grow old while you remain unchanged? Aldrich considered the question carefully. You live. You thrive. You raise your daughter and perhaps have more children someday, if that is what your heart desires. You grow old surrounded by those who love you, and when your time comes, you pass peacefully into whatever waits beyond. And he paused. I continue. I watch over Helena and her children as I watched over you. I carry the memories of this time with me through the centuries, and they bring me warmth when the darkness whispers. That sounds lonely. It is the price of immortality. But it is also the gift. He turned to face her, and his expression held no sadness, only quiet acceptance. I have known you, Seraphina. I have been present for the birth of your daughter. I have witnessed kindness triumph over cruelty, hope triumph over despair. These moments are not diminished by their brevity. They are made precious by it. Seraphina leaned against him, and after a moment's hesitation, he wrapped his arm around her shoulders. Thank you, she said, for coming that night, for keeping your promise, for being good, as Helena asked you to be. Aldrich looked out over his mother's garden, where roses bloomed in colors that existed nowhere else in the world. She told me once that goodness is not a destination. It is a direction. Every day, we choose which way to walk. Every moment, we decide what kind of creature we will be. He glanced down at little Helena, who had fallen asleep against her mother's chest, her tiny fingers curled around a strand of dark hair. I choose to be the kind of creature who protects, he said softly. I choose to be the kind of king who serves. And I choose to honor the debt I owe to a brave woman who saw something worth saving in a monster. The sun set behind the mountains, painting the sky in shades of gold and rose. In the garden, the flowers nodded gently in the evening breeze. And in the castle of Valdoria, a vampire king stood watch over a mother and child who had become the center of his ancient, endless world. They were his to protect, and he would never fail them. In the years that followed, the story of the Vampire King and the Gothic Queen spread throughout the realm. But unlike the dark tales of old, this story carried a different message. It spoke of mercy offered to the fallen and protection given to the vulnerable. It spoke of promises kept across generations and kindness that echoed through centuries. And whenever someone asked how a creature of darkness could become a guardian of light, the answer was always the same: he chose to be. Every day, every moment, every breath, he chose. That was the truest magic of all.